Howdy. I know Paul isn't coming today, but Jeremy should be here shortly to kick us off.
All right, and hopefully he's not waiting for everybody in the Google Meet call.
Oh no. Hey Jeremy.
Hello. How's everyone doing?
Hanging out, chilling.
Doing all right.
I'll take screen share powers if you have a chance, Jeremy.
Sure. I am embarrassingly trying to figure out how to log in as host right now because
Oh yeah, you're yourself right now.
I am. And it used to make it really easy when I tried to share. It would say, do you want to claim host? But let me see. I'll try to figure this out. Unless anybody knows off the top of their head.
No, Zoom is dark magic, as far as I'm concerned.
It's in the bottom of the participant window. All right, you should be able to share now, Laura.
I don't need my whole ultra wide monitor here. How do I do? But yes, got it. This one.
All right, well, I guess we'll get started now. It's 4 minutes after our block. So welcome everyone to the SIG Multicluster meeting for Tuesday, August 24th. And Laura, it looks like you've got our agenda today, so take it away.
Yay. Okay. Hi, everybody. I have two updates. One is kind of logistical, but exciting. Stephen and I are giving a talk for KubeCon about multi-cluster services. The title is Here Be Services Beyond the Multi-Cluster Boundary with Multi-Cluster Services. So we have our recording for it due September 7th, and we thought it would be fun if we could have a virtual audience so that we, feel the energy of the internet tubes. But anyway, so everybody is invited to come to a Zoom meeting just like this, but next Tuesday on August 31st. So same time, and Steve and I are going to record our talk, and then you can use the ta-da emoji afterwards if you want. So yeah, but we would really appreciate it if people came out because that would be fun. So I added a little calendar invite. There's a Zoom link on there. I originated the Zoom link from a Zoom account I have, so it's not like the SIG Multicluster one. So just that's not fake, that's real. So yeah, anything else, Stephen?
No, that pretty much covers it.
Yeah. All right. So I'll send a follow-up to the email thread I had started to, just so anybody who wasn't at this meeting knows the calendar details. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about is about multi-cluster DNS. I sent it out for some approvals and got one LGTM, and then sent for another approval from SIG Network, and we started discussing more about PTR records. So I, as always, prepared some slides, which cleared my head about it as well. I will mention that kind of the TLDR like feeling I'm getting is that maybe we don't want to specify anything super specific about PTR records for multi-cluster DNS. But I'm going to explain the situation a little bit too and remind us of what the conversation was about from the past, just so everybody knows what's going on. So the understanding I have is that PTR records are basically useful for reverse DNS lookup. If you have an IP and you want to know what its DNS name is, you could ask for the PTR record. And the situation, and talking to some different people about when this is useful in practice, is if you have some unknown IP address in like some request or response log and you're a human and you want to know something about it, and you want to look at its human readable DNS name and hopefully infer something about where that where the IP address is from. And some interesting points in the MCS case and also just the general Kubernetes case. For MCS, the services that we support are for in-cluster set pod-to-pod communication. So assumedly there shouldn't be some like wildly external unknown IPs in a request or response that we need to get a PTR record for. But it could potentially be a different IP than you requested. So like if you request a cluster set IP, you might get a response from a specific backend, and if it reports its IP, it's a pod IP instead of the load balanced cluster set VIP. So, and then to take it back even a step further, if I tried to piece together the history of what PTR records are generally useful for, I would say that for people who love DNS and humans who like to read DNS, it's a DNS friendly way to get some metadata about IP. And then one Kubernetes wrinkle about that is that in a Kubernetes world, for Kubernetes managed DNS, this data and more is also retrievable from the API server. Like if you need to know what an IP address, what backend it's associated with. But possibly lots of people and or clients do like DNS reverse lookup. So maybe we still like it. So this is kind of like the stage, I think, of PTR records. We talked about this really briefly like months and months ago. At the time, I didn't like super know what PTR records were useful for in Kubernetes. And this is kind of like the pieces I can get of what I think they're useful for generally and in this case. And then there's a bunch of slides back here where I tried to do the thought experiment of if we had a PTR record, either some of the ones we've talked about in the past or like potentially something else we could invent, like what would they be and what would they be good for? And maybe I'll hold off on like going through all of them, but just like as a really brief like explanation of what these look like. I'm imagining again from this situation where like the only reason you, a human, want to use your PTR record is because you made a request with one DNS name or IP and you got back like a request by some other DNS name or IP somewhere in your logs. So there's a bunch of little thought experiments here of, oh, if you wanted to look up the DNS name for this request IP address, if the result was, for example, dummy service.dummy namespace.svc.cluster.local, which is a possible case we've discussed in the past for a PTR record, then in my opinion, that means that you didn't get any helpful information, I guess, from the fact that you could do this. And the reason I tried to have all these little thought experiments was to figure out, is there like a really strong case for MCS as a standard mandating a certain format for a PTR record? Or is there, and all the way on the other side of the spectrum, is there room for us to maybe say MCS DNS spec doesn't say anything about what your PTR records should be like, and they might be these dummy service ones if you're using dummy services. They might be, you know, something else that you invent if you want it to, but as a standard, we don't have like a specific recommendation. So I'm going to pause there. Yeah, go ahead.
Wouldn't there also be a confusing situation if you were making a request from a cluster that's also exporting a service? Because there's really two.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So if you're making a request of this from a cluster that's also exporting this service,
you would get either the cluster.local for the actual service, not the dummy service, or you'd get the dummy service, or you'd get something like.
Yeah.
I think I'm in the camp of not specifying PTR records unless there's strong pushback.
Yeah.
Are there any?
And to give
PTR
one more.
Records for,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just wondering if there are PTR records for local cluster local services.
Yes.
Right.
There
so
are.
that would
Yes.
that would
and that's
so that
kind
would
of
have
where
an effect
this
on the
extended from in the
10.
first place.
Yeah. So see, for the case where you get a pod IP, presumably you wouldn't get back the cluster set local address name. You'd get back the cluster local host name.
You would. So this is where they get kind of confusing with the multi-cluster case, right? Because if
right, that's the first one.
Yeah, if you were requesting from a cluster that just imported, you would get the local representation, which might be that dummy service, or it might be a cluster set local. But if you're requesting from a cluster that that was exporting the service, but you were consuming it as a multi-cluster service, which is a use case we absolutely support, you could get either the cluster set local name, or you could get the actual service cluster local name.
Which I think isn't allowed in DNS. I might be wrong, but if I remember correctly, PTR records are supposed to be unique.
Right, exactly. So you would get, I mean, we would have to decide what you get, but it wouldn't be clear. And you should definitely get the cluster local name. Otherwise we'd be breaking the service API. But then you've got this interesting behavior where an IP resolves to different things depending on where you make the request. I think all of this sounds very messy to me.
Yeah, and it seems to me you sort of, we're entering leaky abstraction territory where implementation details are going to affect the outcome. So for example, here, this is a sort of, the first example assumes a dummy service. Well, it's only a factor if there is a dummy service, but then, for example, in other scenarios, you could have an implementation where you directly use the target pod IP address and the other cluster, and then what you get back isn't going to depend entirely on the MCS DNS service.
Right.
That is, yeah.
I think, I mean, the other point here too is if we define PTR records, then we are stuck with whatever definition we come up with, and it sounds like this is going to be challenging. If we don't define them, we can always define them later.
Yeah, and we avoid entering into conflict with any PTR definition that causes issues for MCS, but that comes from core Kubernetes.
Exactly. Like, so I think this is sounding like maybe we take the stance that there are no PTR records for MCS, and if this becomes a problem, we can revisit it.
Okay, yeah, that is kind of where it's been like dancing around in the other, like, as this has been discussed, like on PRs and like DMing other people too. Is anybody else on the call want to share or have a thought or feel like that sounds potentially good. Cool. Okay, so yeah, basically I agree that it's quite complicated, and there doesn't seem to be any clear advantage to make a rule about it, especially right now, and potentially like at all, or at least like within the bounds of the thought experiments that I've had thus far. So all right, well, the rest of this conversation is probably going to hash out on the PR, so feel free to interject there, anybody, if you want to, but I did want to get some live convo and make sure that people knew that this was going on, basically.
Awesome.
And yeah, I mean, that's it for that one. And that's my last topic also.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you, Laura. Is there anything else anyone wants to discuss this week?
Yeah, I just wondered, in terms of meeting logistics, the invite that's in everybody's calendar features both the Zoom call and the Google Meet link.
Oh, that is not super helpful. Okay, I'll talk. I think Paul owns the invite, so I'll talk to him, but let's delete the Google Meet. We'll get that updated. And has everyone seen the invite just fine? I guess everyone here has, since we switched to the bi-weekly. I just want to make sure that that went out okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so I'll talk to Paul. We'll get that fixed. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming, and thanks, Laura, for presenting. I do love the idea of having a virtual audience for the KubeCon talk. I think it'll really help kind of make things a little more lively right now, and in this strange world in which we all live. So you know, anyone who can attend, please do next Tuesday. Otherwise, everyone have a great couple weeks, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Take care.
Cool. See ya. Bye.
Bye.